Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Eric Schein. I'm a graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point in New York. I graduated in 1991. I'm not only a federal maritime officer serving as an officer in the United States Merchant Marine, but I'm also a naval officer. I've worked throughout the United States and throughout the world. And many of the things that I have noticed, I am here today to talk to you about briefly in the next half hour. One of the issues is not only the Coast Guard, how it started in the middle of World War I, but the issues and ties to royalty and old world Europe and what is going on right now here in the United States and why it may feel like we're living under King George III once again. If you start to take a closer look, not only at the Coast Guard, but individuals like Ronald Reagan was knighted by the Queen of England. George Herbert Walker Bush was knighted by the Queen of England. Henry Kissinger, knighted by the Queen of England. Alan Greenspan, knighted by the Queen of England. Rudy Giuliani, Mr. 9/11, knighted by the Queen of England. Other individuals like Colin Powell, the Dark Knight, as some call him, not only in a biblical sense or from Nostradamus, but also because of what he has been involved in. He was the individual who sat on the documents for the My Lai massacre from Vietnam. Also individuals like Schwarzkopf, General Schwarzkopf, was also knighted by the Queen of England. You don't get knighted as a peace prize. Being knighted is a war prize. And it is a war prize for carrying out warfare, economic or otherwise, against a sovereign nation state and its people. Much of this has been going on here in the United States by agents and agents provocateurs of the ancient and old world royal families, Habsburg being one that comes to mind, and being one of the central families in much of what is going on. The First Admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard was also knighted, not by the Queen of England at the time, this is in the early 1900s, but the King of England. So you have the first U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, and think of that name or term, Commandant. We used to pay very close watch upon and be very vigilant upon the names and titles that we used for our leaders. There was even a great debate over what to call our first president, George Washington, whether it be Your Eminence, Your Excellence, Your Excellency, Mr. President. One of the reasons for this was that our founding fathers were against royalism. They were against feudalism. They were against collectivism. All of these terms come together and go towards the issue of royal family rule. Even the term Big Brother comes from that, to where if you've ever watched like I hate to give this as an example, but the movie Weird Science, where Chet, the older brother to the individual, the main character, I forgot the actor's name, in that, bullies and treats his younger brother poorly. That term Big Brother comes from our old roots, the lineage from Europe and even Asia and other places, the royal dynasties, the royal families, those who have used their position and privilege to make their families and their heir apparents, who take on other family names, extremely wealthy. And they're very protective of their power, not just in Europe, but here in the United States. And the market instruments that helped marry the European Union together from the European Economic Community and devolved into eventually the European Union, the very same tactics are being used here in the United States, not only to take Canada down as a sovereign nation state and take the United States down as a sovereign nation state and democratic republic, but also Mexico and much of Central and South America, to marry them through market agreements. And this is how our first, the colonies first became a quote-unquote nation, was through market instruments and or security instruments. The issue at hand, many may agree that this sounds like a good thing for Canada, the United States, and Mexico to be married together as one large super state, that we can have common and shared interests both in national security and even civil defense. But this is not about that. This is about enslavement. This is about losing your legal rights and having rights as a subject that are granted to you, not that are inalienable, that are God-given by whatever God you use to or choose to quote-unquote worship. These issues are much larger than that. Here in the United States, we own and control, just through the Department of Defense, and this is one small asset, the DoD owns 66 million acres worldwide. If the lights to the Republic are turned off and there is no more United States in name and it becomes the North American Union, that 66 million acres, the individual who turns off the lights to the so-called Republic gets to decide who gets that 66 million acres. And it's not just the 66 million acres as to the land and property itself, it's what sits on it, as in timber, water, the creatures that roam around upon it, like deer or other, I would say livestock or other creatures, whether we can eat them or preserve them, whether it be in a natural park or national park or a natural park. But also it goes to the issues of the natural resources below this property, 66 million acres, and also the economic access to other markets that this 66 million acres is next to. But this land has untold, it's worth hundreds of trillions of dollars, gold, coal, water, oil, silver, copper, uranium, and other minerals, other resources and assets that are, to a large extent, just like our own National Strategic Oil Reserve, that has close to 700 million barrels in it or more. And think about that, about the price of a barrel of oil today. We'll throw out the price of $150. It's fluctuating on almost a daily basis right now. Times that by 700 million barrels, trillions of dollars that are sitting within the National Strategic Oil Reserve, that is not only supposed to be a military asset, but a strategic economic asset, so that in times of emergency like now, where we have $4 to $5 a gallon gasoline, that can be released into the economy to lower the price of energy products, fuel and more, diesel also, gasoline. These are the issues that people need to give closer scrutiny to, and who are carrying on these games with the markets themselves, because much of everything that is going on now has been carried on before, not only in World War I and World War II and also the Great Depression. The market is being manipulated, not only oil and gasoline, but to the point of the issues of quote-unquote global warming. You can look to the issue of global warming, or at least the capture of the issue of global warming, as a marketing tool, much like the Y2K bug from, or the Millennium bug, about revolving around the issues of computers and the computer clock, and the new year of the year 2000 and what would happen to these internal clocks and the computers and or the memory of the computers, which was used as a marketing tool to sell computer services and computers. And it's fear and terror. And Roosevelt had a very good, and many people think that Roosevelt was a quote-unquote traitor to his class, traitor to the elite. But when you start to look into many of the things that Roosevelt did himself, they were not as beneficial to, and even mirrored many of the things that went on in Germany back in the 1920s, 1930s, and into the 1940s. Social Security number and Social Security card. And many of the things that are going on with the Social Security Trust Fund pertain to everything going on today with also immigration. We have students coming into the United States getting, foreign students getting J-1 visas to where they are issued a Social Security number, temporary number. They do not pay into Social Security. So you have to ask yourself, A, why are they being issued a Social Security number? And B, why are they not paying into it if they're being or issued a Social Security number? And the reason for that I put forth to you is to raid the Social Security Trust Fund, to set up these dummy account numbers so that other individuals, because every time these students come into the United States, they have to get a new SS temporary number issued to them, Social Security number issued to them when they come in. They're only supposed to work during the summer months, but they're getting good paying jobs in restaurants as waiters and waitresses and other positions coming in from Ireland, Scotland, England, the European Union, Asian countries, South America, and more. And they're taking away first right of refusal on jobs here in the United States by American citizens, which I find to be problematic at best. And some of these things, you know, Carol C. Lamb is one of the 8 or 9 U.S. attorneys that was recently fired about a year and a half ago. She is a Chinese national. She was born and raised up to the age of about 8 or 10 in China. She emigrated to the United States, but she was involved with many of the Medicare scandal. She was supposedly investigating it, but I feel to some extent there's much more going on there with her involvement in the Medicare scams that Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist was involved in. But she was fired by the Bush administration, I believe, to give her cover because she was involved in some Templar-type schemes, much like the Templars carried on in France, in setting up these, you know, false accounts or false bank accounts, and then when people went to go get their money and or property or trust, it was gone. Much like we've seen happen with Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, Tyco, and more, where individuals who had invested their pensions in those companies show up to be missing. And the CEO, who, if you do a check on many of these individuals, have very close ties to foreign countries, to foreign nations, and even to foreign royal powers, foreign royal families. Many say that George W. Bush, and his father, George Herbert Walker Bush, have the DNA or the lineage of Queen Elizabeth. They also say that Queen Elizabeth has the ties to the Habsburg families from not just Germany, but the German states. You can look to even, you know, it's been back and forth over time. Switzerland, Poland, Russia, and Eastern Europe, and Germany broke up sections of Poland over time, and it made its way back, and it's changed over time, as well as Switzerland, Lithuania, Czechoslovakia. Many of these countries are now gone or been absorbed. Prussia, which became the driving force for what became Germany, which was carried out under Bismarck. Many of these ancient royal families, and you can look to what's going on here in the United States. We have a governor of California who has dual citizenship with Austria. He will not denounce his citizenship. He may be a vice presidential or presidential candidate. Many have paired him up with, and he's been on the cover of, I believe it was Time magazine, with a skull and bones type belt buckle with his hand around Mayor Bloomberg from New York. When you start to look at what is going on, we have Michael Chertoff, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security, who has dual citizenship with Israel. And it doesn't matter how close of an ally or friend a certain country may be, or how neutral it may be in world affairs like, say, Switzerland, no head of state, whether it be a governor or the head of Homeland Security, should have or be allowed to have dual citizenship with a foreign nation. This issue of globalism, of internationalism, is not, it's about restoring royal, feudal rule to where 95 to 90% of us are serfs and or peasants or subjects, to where we have no God-given or inalienable rights. The ancient beliefs and or edicts from Babylon and Assyria and Samaria and Phoenicia, that even a king, where we have no kings here, we are all sovereigns, we are all kings and or queens here in the United States. We took the Magna Carta and put it in the hands of every individual here, not just the hands of princes and barons, to where the ancients from these cultures believed that a king who could not make good on his debt could be and should be forced into slavery to repay on his debt. And you've seen the changes here in the bankruptcy laws in the United States to where an individual does not, and these were one of the foundational issues in our Constitution, was the issue of bankruptcy, and it goes into usury and more, to where now individuals are being corralled, shepherded into bankruptcy trustee holding pens, to where they offer up or have to give up much of their life's earnings for years to finally realize that they are never going to be let out of and be able to be discharged from and obtain a bankruptcy and get a fresh start. These changes in the laws have been pushed by corporations like Citibank. When you start to look into the games that have been carried on by Citibank, they marry much like Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, Tyco, and others, and they marry much of what is going on even within the Coast Guard and many of our branches of federal government and our federal agencies, to where the Coast Guard is now carrying on military or admiralty courts of American civilians here in the United States, which mirrors exactly what the royal families from England did to our people here in America prior to, leading up to, throughout, and even after our Revolutionary War. And we have to look back to and learn our history. Another issue, and this goes to the issues of royalty again. The 14th Amendment, I believe it was originally supposed to be the Titles of Nobility Act. And this went to, and our founding fathers were very adamant about this, that it was included in our state and federal constitutions, that no titles of nobility should be granted or given or accepted by anyone here in the United States, because that is how much our founding fathers detested the thought of self-appointed royal families who used position and power and authority to lord themselves over others. And we are now fighting the very same battle that has been fought for thousands of years of royalism, feudalism, collectivism. They call it internationalism or globalism as well. And this is being carried out by the agents of these royal families who wish to once again subject us all to their privy councils, to their star chambers, where an individual's life can be summed up. They can be, everything that they've done in and throughout their life can be read into the record, good or bad. They can be charged and prosecuted for that, and even to a large extent executed. And there are many ways to execute an individual nowadays. You don't need to put a bullet in someone's head or hang them. You can administratively execute them by denying them proper medical benefits with a stroke of a pen, by denying them the right to work with a stroke of a pen, by denying them their license, whether it be as a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, or anyone else who has a license as a quote-unquote need or right to work, that you need this license or you need to be licensed or certified to be able to work in this industry. They're doing this across the board to any and all industries. Look at the changes that have occurred to doctors in their profession. It's all corporate now. Most doctors do not have their own practice. They work for a corporation of a bunch of other doctors or an HMO. Or if they are or have their own practice, they have to deal with an HMO, which goes again to collectivism or big brother or corporate control. The same thing for lawyers. If you're an individual, as a citizen, as a federal officer, as a naval officer, as a laborer, or anyone else, if you need counsel, it is extremely difficult to find counsel nowadays as an individual to go up against what has become the modern day castle or empire. A good example of this is Walmart, to where Walmart comes into a community, a city, and or state and destroys the local small businesses, to where these individuals take their money home, they feed their families, they put it in a local bank, they buy a house, they invest in the community, to where Walmart takes that money not only to destroy the local economy, the local community, but they take the money out of that community every single night, out of every single community, and they send it back to corporate headquarters, so it is not invested locally. They pay their employees dirt wages to where they cannot afford to even buy their own products. This is slavery. This is indentured servitude. This is what many, if not most Americans came to America, helped found this country to get away from, to start something new, to be that beacon on the hill. And now we are falling to this system of royalism, where you have individuals like Congressman Duncan Hunter, former Congressman Duncan Hunter, who was just recently running for presidential office as a Republican presidential candidate against McCain, to where he wanted to set up his son to take over his congressional seat. That is royalism. That is feudalism. That is not and should not be accepted here in the United States. Another example of this is Stephen Gyllenhaal. His son and daughter, Jake and Maggie, you've probably seen The Dark Knight, Batman. Maggie Gyllenhaal is the love interest of Two-Face and or Bruce Wayne from Bruce Wayne's childhood, as the story goes. Jake and Maggie are the heir apparents to Stephen Gyllenhaal, who is and has been ennobled, made a noble by the Swedish crown family. And you start to look at other places like Liechtenstein. There's been a recent report by a technician or a bureaucrat or technocrat in Liechtenstein, to where many American government individuals, elected officials and executive officers from the executive branch and judicial officers and others have been moving money out of the United States into private accounts in Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is a monarchy. It is one of the last remaining full functioning monarchies in the world. And if you look on a world map where it is, it goes to Switzerland, Austria, Bavaria, Germany, and more. And you look to corporations like T-Mobile, where T stands for telecom with a K, and it is a German corporation. This is not about a fair and level playing field. This is not about globalization. This is not about internationalism. This is about feudalism and royal family rule. Kings and queens, and they will pull out the guillotines, and you can see that again now, where they are preparing us for World War, so that all those individuals like myself and others who are coming out and trying to inform others about what is and has been going on for a very long time can be taken out under the dark veil of a war, whether it be on terror or some other foreign boogeyman, whether it be Korea, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. These wars, these endless wars, need to stop. And that is the only way that we can cure the problems facing the world, whether you believe in global warming or not, whether you believe in the issues of peak oil or not, whether you believe in the overcrowding. When you start to look at it, 80 to 90% of the world's landmass is unpopulated. They have us crowded into centralized cities for a reason, so that we think that, just like back in the days, the Dark Ages, the medieval time, people living around the castles who could not go out into the king's forest and hunt for food had to sit around the castle and pick up scraps thrown outside of the castle, but then were required to defend the castle. The modern corporation has become the castle. Guys like Kozlowski and others who have been taking $660 million away personally themselves from corporations like this, not only to injure the workers, but those who invest in these corporations. This needs to stop, and people need to understand more fully what is going on and not stick their head in the sand and start to confront it wherever it raises its ugly head, and start to stand for not just energy independence, but independence as put forth by our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence for the United States as a republic, as a democratic republic, a hybrid that was put forth and shown very strongly in our third, fourth, fifth, and sixth presidents who served 2 terms each as members of the Democratic Republican Party when they were one and the same. Thank you, and I ask you to give these matters serious consideration and start to act and think upon and confront these royal families. Thank you.